You probably do. This is marijuana, the most used drug in schools. This is going to be the subject of this presentation. Okay, so ever since I was a really young kid, adults have been warning me about doing drugs. Smoking is bad. Say no to drugs, they would tell me. It seemed their only purpose in life was to tell me not to smoke. Back then I didn't really think too much about it, but now I realize just how dangerous drugs are. So we all know cigarettes are bad. Well, all drugs are bad if used in the wrong way. But marijuana is easily one of the most dangerous. Anyways, let's get back on topic. It's pretty basic knowledge what marijuana does to your health, but what does it do to your education? As of now, marijuana is the most used drug in schools. That means it's more popular than cigarettes. This diagram shows that in 1993, 26% of students used marijuana. Now, in late 2013, 36% did. That's pretty sad. And because it's so often used, a majority of high and middle school students have used or are addicted to marijuana. Okay, first of all, medically speaking, marijuana leads to mental, heart, lung, attention, memory, and learning problems. But marijuana also affects your education just as much as it does your health. If smoked regularly before graduation, you have an extremely high chance of not graduating college, doing other drugs, and suicide. The risk of bad grades, fights, and attention problems also increase. All these things can be fatal towards education. So obviously there are countless more problems that come with marijuana, but some people think marijuana is a good thing. Well, medical marijuana, of course. Many schools around the country are debating on whether or not medical marijuana should be legalized, except for Colorado, which it already is. Sure, illegal marijuana should be outlawed, but if you really need it, and using it in the right way, it should be allowed. But of course, there's always a consequence that comes with this. Of course, students might going to try to smoke it the wrong way. I mean, with that rule, say that they're doing it the right way, but of course they're not. So, but this is a question for another day. Probably by now, we all know that the things that marijuana can do to you, but I'd like to go more into detail. Some major short-term effects include sensory distortion, panic, anxiety, poor movement, bad reaction time, and risk of heart attack. To your education, it leads to social problems, graduation failure, bad grades, violent outbursts, attention loss, and bad attitudes. Some long-term effects include disorders, high chance of cancer, loss of male sex hormones, mood swings, aggression, suicide, and permanent organ failure. All of this just for a few minutes of happiness. Marijuana is not a joke. It is dangerous and deadly. Even though you've probably heard this countless times before, don't do drugs, especially marijuana.